whoa, 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 there we are in the place of yeah, 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 yeah.
Here's your host, Brandon Lauren Maxwell.
Which one, Esther?
Don't matter.
Get Holmes. La primera live!
Wow. So that was the powerful ending to the 1992 crime drama American Me, starring Edward James Olmos, a film that garnered both critical acclaim and some criticism. With us today, we have the kid who pulled the trigger in that now famous end scene, except he's now all grown up. His name is Steve Cisneros, and now he heads up the Phantom Projects Theater Group, which has appeared in Forbes, CBS, NBC, ABC, Fox, Washington Post, and the LA Times. He's also directed over 50 productions and was recognized with the Ambassador of Peace Award from the Orange County Violence Prevention Coalition. Steve, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
So I'm excited to have you. I'm excited to talk a little bit about your experience on American Me, but I'm first curious to know, how did you end up involved with American Me to begin with? Because you were how old?
I was 11 going on 12. My birthday landed right in the middle of filming. So I was very young still. And, I just gotten into acting in terms of TV film stuff. I'd done theater for a few years, and I had an agent who got me the audition. How did I end up in the part? Well, actually, I ended up in the part because I was so wrong for every other part in the movie. I auditioned for Palito, which Jacob Vargas played. He was the driver in the car. That character was much older than I was, and I'm not even quite sure how I got the audition for that part because I was way too young. And it's kind of an embarrassing story, but it's truthfully what happened. We got there and I had the script in front of me of Palito's lines. And I said, I'm reading with my dad at Universal Studios. And I say, Oral Carnell. And he goes, what? And I go, Oral Carnell. He goes, what are you saying? I go, this is what it says. I said, and so he looks at the script and he goes, that's orale carnal. That phrase was new to me at 10, 11 years old. And so I go in and I'm reading to myself, orale carnal, orale carnal. I'm like saying it in my head. I go and I read for Bob Manones, the casting director, and it comes out Oral Carnell. And I just my dad goes, how'd it go? And I go, terrible. Just get to the car. Let's go home. Like, this casting director will never want to see me again. Edward James Olmos will never want to see me again. Like, this is terrible. This is before cell phones. I hadn't even gotten home yet, half hour away. My mom says they called and they want to see you back. And I said, they've got to be crazy. I absolutely did horrible his audition. They go, well, it's a different part. The name is Chivo, and here's the sides. And it was the script from the last scene. And I thought, well, I feel like this I can do. And so I went in and I felt like I nailed the audition at that point. But then it all made sense. I was this innocent looking kid who, just the voice even in that scene is so opposite from everything you hear throughout the movie. And it was like, well, that's how I got the part, because right. Because he was this innocent looking kid. And looking back on it now, 30 years later, I see it in a whole new set of eyes and ears than I did at that time. And I see that last scene now. And I watched it last night preparing for today. And yeah, it's a scary ending. This little innocent looking kid who, looks like he should not be in that situation. And so that's how I got the part because, that was a world that was brand new to me at that point. So.
Yeah, well, and I feel like when you watch that end scene, which was a pretty powerful way to end the movie, but basically what it's saying is you're going in a circle, right? That cycle of violence starts all over again, exactly. And that's that boy's foray now into the world to prove himself. And so it was like that transition from being that innocent boy to becoming a full blown
Exactly. And it's 100%. And one of the things I remember growing up as the movie came out, there were a lot of interviews that Olmos would do and other stars who had bigger roles in the movie would do. And, you know, as a kid, that's my first movie I'd ever done, my first time professional setting like that. So I was excited just to be a part of all the promotion and such that was, or get to watch all the promotion was going on. And so many of the interviews, the interviewer would ask Olmos, they would say, let's talk about that last scene. And my parents would be like, yeah, let's talk about the last scene we're listening. And Olmos would always say, no. I don't want to ruin the ending. Like the ending needs to be seen, you know? And so they would never talk about it. And at the time as a kid, again, I was like, why aren't we talking about my scene? But again, as I see it as older, well, it makes sense because it kind of comes out of, you know, you just can't help but root for this kid to not, when they hand him the gun, you don't want him to do it, you know? And even there's this innocence this genuine innocence, I'll address that in a second, there's genuine innocence that as soon as he has that gun, I just feel like you see, it's gone, you know? And in a matter of seconds, that innocent kid is no longer that innocent kid. And he maybe is the next Santana at that point, who knows, you know? Right. And so, but when I was filming that, you know, again, this innocence that was there, when he was directing me, he said, okay, and then they're going to hand you the bag. You're going to sniff the glue. You're going to hand it back. And I'm like, oh, yeah, sure. I had no idea what he was talking about. And so the first time we shot it, I'm watching, his name was Joey in the backseat. I'm literally watching him to see what he's doing with that bag so I could emulate it in the first take because I had no idea what he was doing. I didn't know what sniffing glue was as an 11-year-old kid. I didn't know. Sure. But it's true. Once I had that prop gun in my hands, you did feel this sense of change over you. And it was interesting just to feel that difference, you know, even just in that first take.
So you were already involved with theater. You got into the project. Now, were the other people that you were working around, were they all involved in theater? Because I've heard and I've seen, I think I watched a documentary some years back that there were a fair amount of actual gang members from the local area who were involved on the project.
There were, yeah. In fact, the guy in the backseat, Joey, was a gang member. And I didn't know until watching that documentary, Lives in Hazard, that he ended up becoming blind through a drive-by shooting before the movie came out. He never actually got to see the movie because he was involved in a real drive-by shooting. And my interactions with those who were not actors but were active gang members at that time, were very positive, actually. They were so excited to be there, and they were so nice to me. And I was, you know, again, this innocent-looking, you know, cute little kid. I was the only real kid on the set for the most part. So they were all just like so nice and friendly and motherly to me. But there were incidents where at one point we were shooting the drive-by scene. They came and talked to Joey at one point, and I didn't fully grasp what was happening until later on, but I guess there were signs being flashed between, I don't know if it was at him or whatever, but they were kind of saying like, look, we gotta protect everybody here. And but as a kid, again, I didn't realize what kind of danger that's possibly going on from there. But you know, again, everybody was very kind. It was a great environment. I never felt like I was in danger at any point, but there were little things that made you realize later on how much participation from the local community was involved to make this all happen, to film, you know, in the heart of where we were throughout the filming. Yeah.
Where was the bulk of it filmed?
The stuff I was in was mostly Boyle Heights, downtown LA. I know there was some stuff in Folsom Prison, which I wasn't involved with, but it definitely goes to show the sense of realism that they wanted to get for the movie. There's certain aspects I think you can't create on a movie set. And even I watched Lives in Hazard again recently, and it was a scene that really caught my eye when they said that one of the set dressers said he found the gang member, and if he let that gang member put his name on one of the walls, then that individual was going to authenticately, or you know, give an authentic feel with all the spray painting and the graffiti on some of the scenery out there. So it definitely was realism in every sense of the word.
Yeah, it's been a while since I watched the documentary. Now, for our audience, what was the name of that documentary?
Lives in Hazard.
Lives in Hazard, right?
It's on the American Me Blu-ray and DVD. It's on that disc as well. So. Oh,
is it? Okay. Yeah, and I remember that. So you had actually multiple gangs on set, people from different gangs, and I think Edward James Olmos and some other people had to kind of broker a little bit of a temporary peace deal between them. And and it worked, but at times there were tensions.
Yeah, in fact, at one point we were filming over 4th of July weekend, and they gathered everybody at one of the apartments that we were filming at, and they kind of asked everyone, do we want to kind of take a break this weekend? Because we've been told that the local gangs may not be able to guarantee our safety this weekend. And I think that was, as a kid, I kind of realized, whoa, this is interesting, but everyone kind of agreed and voted to say, you know what, let's film, let's power through, let's make it happen. And we did. And thankfully there were no incidents while filming. Unfortunately, there were incidents after the film came out with multiple individuals being killed who worked on it, which is definitely tragic. But as far as the filming period, we were safe and there were no issues that I was aware of, at least, at the time or since then.
Right. Yeah. Danny Trejo actually had said that his number that he pegged on the amount of people who died as a result of the film, some of the anger of the film, was 10. Yeah. 10 people.
Yeah. I watched that interview just recently, and I remember at the time, I didn't have a fear that I was in any way in danger, but it was interesting as I knew, Anna, I think last name was Lizarraga, if I'm saying that right, but she was the grandmotherly lady who worked on the film, who was also in the film, but she kind of brokered some of the peace and truce arrangements, and she was killed. And she was this, lovely lady who you just couldn't even imagine someone wanting to do that to,
Sure.
But they're definitely ruffled some feathers, it sounds like.
Yeah. And, the 90s were a different time than today. And yes, you still have some of that mentality out there, but I remember the 90s and being around a lot of that, and people reacted pretty harshly to maintain a reputation, and it was considered a pretty big deal. I think the slight that they felt. So, and it was interesting to me is, Edward James Olmos is from that community. And I'm sure he felt terrible for that. It wasn't what he wanted. He's dedicated a lot of his career toward building up communities and trying to spotlight raza, So I feel for him, but I'm curious as to what was it like to work with Edward James Olmos?
He was one of the nicest guys in the absolute world. I mean, nothing but great things to say. That picture right there and a lot of other pictures that we're looking at now, because I was the only kid on the set for the most part, I always had a chaperone with me. So my parents were taking pictures all the time. This is before cell phones and such. So,
sure.
My memory is that we were really the only personal camera kind of floating around. And looking back, we laughed because we're like, how did they not just kick us off set? We were just taking all these pictures, but we did it. We were genuinely excited to be there, and Edward James Olmos never said no to a photo. I ended up finding more pictures with him than I realized I even had. I'm like, man, why do we keep asking him for photos? But we were so excited, and he never didn't take that moment, even though he was directing, starring, I'm sure producing all these things. He never didn't have time for anyone on that set, and genuinely, truly one of the nicest guys I've ever met, and had a great time working under him on the project.
Yeah, I'm excited to see his new film, which hasn't gotten a lot of media attention, but I think it's called Walking with Herb.
It rings a bell. Yes.
Yeah. And that looks pretty interesting, where he's golfing. I believe he's golfing, and George Lopez is also in it and comes back to life to help him golf or something like that.
I mean, actually, I haven't seen that clip then, but I mean, looking back at just his whole filmography, I mean, Stand and Deliver and Zoot. I mean, there's just so many great films, and he's so fantastic in them. And I definitely didn't know at the time what I was a part of when doing this movie. And I would say I probably didn't even truly appreciate it until, maybe even 8 to 10 years later on at that point, when I realized. And even to this day, I don't think there's a week that goes by where someone doesn't mention this movie. And even friends of mine will bring it up just to prove a point that people know the movie, or I don't walk around necessarily talking about it, but I will if someone asks. And it's amazing how much people, they know my scenes. I feel like if you've seen this movie, that scene sticks out with you, but they can quote dozens of lines and, and they have a million questions. And I love that. I definitely embrace that now more than I did when I was younger. I think for a long time as a kid, I kind of thought, well, that's the only movie I had done. And, no one wants to talk to me to the movie 15 years ago. But then you realize that this movie is it really has stuck with a generation, with a culture, with, people have grown up showing it to their kids and their grandkids. And, it really has impacted me in a much different way now as I got older, and I appreciate it in a whole new way, I think now.
Yeah, well, the film was recently on added to Netflix, and I think it got as high as number 2. I saw it at number 2. I don't know if it got to number 1 all the way, but that's still a huge accomplishment.
Which is amazing for 30 years later. I think it's
right.
Incredible. Yeah, absolutely. And we're proud of it. I mean, I'm proud of it. And I think, I've seen that movie. My parents took me to see that movie, I think, until the very last theater it was showing in an uptown Whittier, because after a while, I was like, okay, let's go. We're done. But I'm glad they did, because how many chances do you get to see yourself on this large screen, Right. And so we probably saw it, I mean, I would say 50, 60 times in the actual movie theater.
Yeah, that's cool. That's a cool movie to see in a theater too. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that movie's definitely withstood the test of time. In fact, I did a poll about 2 years ago online where we ranked basically everybody's favorite kind of Chicano films. And we started with about 30 films. And then every week we had new voting, kind of like a football bracket.
Right.
And American Me, if I remember right, finished first or second out of all those films.
That's incredible.
And I think it was Mi Familia and American Me were kind of the two.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and also with social media being, obviously didn't exist back then, that's what also allowed me to see and realize how much of a culture is inspired by this movie and know this movie. By just searching, even just hashtag American Me, you see how many people are just posting and talking about that. I mean, almost daily, and I think that's also what made me realize later on in life that this wasn't just a movie I was in. That's how I remember it. It's a movie that, people just really love and have a connection to over time.
How do you feel when people compare it to Blood In, Blood Out? Because I'm sure you've heard that comparison. All the time. And, I've never heard anything competitive necessily, right. But they're just two movies that people genuinely love and have an affection for. Right. I remember hearing a lot about the movie when it first came out, and I've always just heard people that they just both rank side by side in so many memories, and that one, and there was a third one that had come out somewhere around then that gets lumped in that conversation a lot. I'm blanking on the name right now, but I think it's just great that they're talking about them still, regardless of even the context sometimes. Now, you're still involved in theater, or you're really involved in theater, but are you still involved in film? I'm not. I actually stopped just a few years after American Me, because I started to get into, and American Me really did have an aspect to this, but I started to realize how powerful the medium can be. And so I ended up starting a theater company just about 5 years after American Me came out. I was 17 and started this group that was meant to use theater as a way to speak to my peers and to talk to my generation. And so we started going into schools, doing shows about social issues that young people deal with: racism, violence, bullying. We've evolved now to social media, cyberbullying, eating disorders. We've grown to do many more projects on top of that. But that at the time was what we started off doing. And so I really fell in love with being on the other side of things, producing, directing. And so I really kind of gave up on acting shortly afterwards, and have been running this nonprofit for the last 25 years, where we go into schools, where we bus thousands of schools into our theater to come see our shows at deeply discounted prices. We donate over $60,000 a year in free tickets and performances to underperforming schools and school districts. So it's something that definitely, I think, helped shaped me later on in terms of being able to use this style of work to inspire audiences. So I definitely shifted gears, but didn't go too far away, if you will. How do you feel about the current conversation about representation? It's I felt that as a kid, for one, without fully realizing what was going on, if you will. The number of times that I would audition for projects and work only to find out that it was a little white kid that got the part, and wasn't a Hispanic kid that beat me out, if you will. And the number of times I was told I wasn't Mexican enough when I auditioned for a kid, and I didn't know what that meant because I was Mexican. So what did that mean necessarily, And so I definitely felt that. And as I've gotten older and get into the producing world of things,
it's something that is high on my radar, ensuring that the shows we do here and the people who are involved in our company, that we have representation across the board, and that we're involving every ethnicity, every race, every identity, every sexual preference. I mean, everyone has an opportunity to work with us in our organization. And there's been a lot of obviously dialogue, especially in the last couple of years, about lack of representation. And I'm able to look back at what we've done for the last 25 years and be very proud and confident to say that we've always been on the right side of that conversation. But it's good that it's being talked about more so that we can make sure that we continue to do our part, and ensure that individuals have an opportunity to come here and be utilized for who they are and the talents they have, and I think that I didn't necessarily realize when I was younger, but being at the time a young Hispanic producer, I didn't realize that was something. I was just being me and doing what I loved, And I would hear over the years that people would say, I loved seeing you in that position, or I loved seeing you have the authority to do what you do, and I. Again, kind of like American Me, didn't necessarily appreciate it until I got older that we were doing something kind of unique in that way,
Yeah, I have this discussion pretty often with friends of mine who are critics and friends of mine that are in film and things like that. And, we discuss the concept of quote unquote negative representation. What does that mean? Right. And you have films like American Me, Blood In, Blood Out, that some people don't like. And then you have large swaths of people that do like them. Right. And I've always made the argument that the problem isn't gang films. The problem is when somebody writes a one-dimensional character, right, who's only a gang member. Right. You don't see the other side of these characters. And I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that as a producer and a director.
Yeah, well, it's the pieces we pick. It's important to us that the audience has an opportunity to relate to something they're seeing on stage. An example would be we took a show, our teen show about racism and bullying. We went to Wyoming a couple years ago. Now, we're based in Southern California, but a theater in Wyoming booked us. And we got a great group of teenagers together. Everyone was represented. It was a wonderful group of people to go out there with. And we go to Wyoming, and of our 10 kids, 2 of them are African-American. And we get to Wyoming, and of the 3,000 students we performed for, only 2 of them were African-American also. And those students went right up to our kids and just thanked them for being there. And I made sure our 2 kids realized that sometimes just being there and being who you are is enough sometimes, because they don't necessarily feel like they went out and did something so grandiose or made this grand statement, but them just being there and being themselves was so important to those 2 kids. And if we didn't have those individuals in our cast, then those 2 young people in Wyoming may have continued to feel like they were the only ones in a lot of aspects. So it's important to us, even when we do some of our larger shows, like let's say we do Diary of Anne Frank at our stage, which is a 13-year-old theater. Yeah. Whenever we do our shows that have a young person as the lead character, we cast a young person in that role. So that's important for us because when you go to see a large production at a large theater, there's usually a 25, 30-year-old playing a 14-year-old, and when we do these shows, we have adults play adults and 14-year-olds play 14-year-olds. And that inspires the kids in the audience to look at that and say, wait, I can do that. That young person is carrying this show on their shoulders. I can do that. That inspires me, Sure. And so we do shows that just kind of encompass everything. Stand and Deliver, there's a script of that, which I've been dying to do. And I want to produce that one year. And I think
that'd be cool.
We're probably approaching that. I think we're going to do that one pretty soon, actually, because I've read that about 10 years ago, and it's been on my radar. And there's always factors to why you can do certain shows at times, getting the rights, things like that. But we're actually taking over a new theater. We're adding a theater to our roster in La Habra, California, which has a very heavy Hispanic population. And one of our priorities coming into that was to start doing bilingual productions in that space. And I think Stand and Deliver is going to fall into that series over there, which I'm very excited for.
Yeah, that is very cool. Now, you sent us another photo. Now, explain to us what this is right here.
Well, one, this is me being very surprised my dad wasn't kicked out for getting this picture. But this was the little puppet wedding scene, which was cut from the movie.
From the movie.
Yeah, so they were filming I never saw, of course, the final scene, but that was the little puppet, gets married, and then there's a reception where he gets drunk and everything like that, and that's when ends up getting Olmos or Santana back into jail. But so that was the actual wedding that was filmed, but didn't make the final cut. So
yeah, and I'm thinking back to the film, right? So the film just implied that he had been married. They showed him out drunk and stuff after the wedding and still in his wedding and stuff like that.
Yeah, you see him coming out of the chapel. We're all pouring rice and everything. So you see him coming right out of the chapel, but they never show the actual wedding itself. And so that was, and I've got a couple of others that I'm going to put on my Instagram soon. We're still scanning all of them. But yeah, that was from the wedding scene that never made the cut.
So for the audience, you are currently giving away posters for...
We're selling posters, as a fundraiser for my nonprofit. So that documentary, Lives in Hazard, which came out on NBC, I want to say about 2 years after American, maybe a little less. I was pleasantly surprised to see that the poster and the postcards was a giant picture of my face. I didn't know was happening. And all of a sudden we get a postcard in the mail for Lives in Hazard, NBC, and it was literally a picture of me. And in my naive stature, I go to my parents, I'm like, well, that was nice of them to make me this postcard. And then we start seeing interviews promoting it, and there's a poster version in the background of all these interviews of my face. So, I was blown away. So my brother, who worked for, I think, Disney Studios at the time, he was able to make some phone calls and got a hold of someone in the production office, and they sent me a bunch of posters, which we've held at my parents' house all these years. And my dad's, my dad's like, well, why are we hanging on to, 20 posters? Why don't you should, maybe use them as a fundraiser or whatever. So I did. So I've been autographing them we have them on eBay as a fundraiser for my nonprofit, or I'm personalizing them and autographing them, and then, mailing them out to whoever wants them. And I've been surprised that people have wanted them. We've sold a few so far. So
sure. I think that's cool. I mean, I would have one of those as well. I mean, that's, it's an iconic movie, and I don't have the image with me right now, but when people see the poster, they'll automatically recognize that scene or that picture.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. And it's like I said, I was very hesitant to list them. And my dad, my dad's the biggest American Me cheerleader there is. His when his one of his rooms in the house, he's got just American Me stuff literally everywhere hanging up. And he's got that poster framed. And like I said, he just held on to them all his years. He said people would want this. And I said, no one's going to want this. And he was right. And he was right. People have wanted them. And I've never seen them anywhere else. I'm the only one, as far as I know, that really still has these. I'm sure the production probably dumped them over time.
So when you say that your dad collects American Me stuff, what other stuff is there of American Me besides posters?
The VHS, the soundtrack, cassette tape, promotional things that even video stores had back in the day.
Oh, that's
cool.
Would
make different versions of the poster, so things like that, any kind of newspaper articles, reviews. Literally any mention of the movie that has ever happened since 1992, my dad probably has on his wall. And even going through all these pictures, which I'm putting on my Instagram now, there's even pictures of him making me stand in front of, video stores next to the poster, or next to the tape on the rack next to Wayne's World, and at the time, and you can see my face in a few of these, Dad, come on. But I'm thankful over time now to look back and be able to have those, because it's a unique thing. Even when the DVD came out, my face is a chapter, which, that's kind of cool. That's neat stuff. And so
it is cool because there's a lot of people in the film. And you are one of the more recognizable people. You see you. In fact, I posted a picture on my Twitter talking about how you were going to be on my podcast. And everybody knew the picture.
Right. Right.
You just you're recognizable. So
yeah.
No, go ahead.
No, I was saying it's just, it's cool because, as soon as, if anyone finds out I was in the last scene and I did the drive-by, people tell me the line. Oh, La Primera lives, I don't even say it. People just right away say it. And I think, how many people can say they have a line that is really, iconic in terms of, how it relates in the movie kind of a thing, And
right.
I'm definitely honored for that without a doubt.
Now you have different theaters in different cities throughout California?
So we do now, actually. So we're based in La Mirada, California, which is right in the border of LA and Orange County. And for the last 20 years, we've been a resident group at the La Mirada Theater for the Performing Arts, which is a 1,300-seat theater here in La Mirada. We also travel to schools, and we also travel throughout the country to theaters that book our show to perform, under their name with their theater, basically. But last month, we were selected by the city of La Habra, which is just one city over, to basically take over their historic 135-seat theater. It's called the La Habra Depot, and we're taking it over starting June 1st. So it's going to become the Phantom Projects Theater, which we will then run, manage, and program year round. So we'll have La Mirada Theater. We'll do a few shows a year there still, but then in La Habra, we're going to be programming everything in that theater, from an adult series, a children's series, small concerts, comedians. I was even thinking of maybe doing an American Me screening and get some of the cast together and do a Q&A aspect to it, which I think would...
Well, next year's the 30th anniversary then, right?
Exactly. And that's kind of where my mind is going with that. Absolutely. And so, so it's a lot going on, and I thoroughly love what I do. Like I said, we are a nonprofit. We survive on grants and donations, things like that, hence the poster sales, but I think it's, my heart and passion is with this organization because of the work we do and the schools we go into and the students that we work with. I'm honored and happy to say that our group has changed lives over the years. And that's what really keeps me going all these years later, to be able to see that continue.
Well, my life is a life that was changed through theater in a lot of ways. I was a wild kid. I was involved with gangs for a long time. I was a gang member for, 10 years, and in and out of jail, getting arrested, things like that. And, I remember when I dropped out of high school. I was 17 when I dropped out of high school, and I was carrying a gun on me everywhere I went, and I pretty much had resigned myself to that's what I was going to do. I was going to go to prison for a really long time at some point because that's what all the homeboys did. And I didn't give a lot of thought to anything, but I'd always been writing rap songs and poetry up until that point without any thought. It was just something that I did. And I got a call from my principal after I was out of school for about a year. And she's like, I just keep thinking about you, and all this time knowing that you're out of school. And she's like, would you consider just meeting with me and maybe coming back to school? And, she just kept calling me and bugging me. And eventually I was like, all right, I'll listen to what you have to say. And I go there. And when I go into her office, the theater, the person who runs the theater there is with her. And they're like, we think that you should get into, some type of arts program in addition to school. Try dance or try theater or something like that. And I was like, well, I'm not going to do dance, and I don't really want to act. And she's like, well, maybe you could try writing a play or something, and I was like, well, I've never written a play. I don't know how to write a play or anything like that. And so I decided to give it a try, and I just instantly fell in love with it. And I wrote a play that got produced, and it was exciting and it was fun. And we kind of got to tour around. But it completely changed everything in my life. And I was still pretty wild for some years after that, but that seed had been planted, and now I'm a writer. That's what I do. And theater, film, if I'd never been exposed to that, I never would have had any type of thing to fall back on. I never would have had, and it makes me think about all the kids out there who don't ever have that opportunity. And sometimes you don't know what's in you till you're exposed to it.
Absolutely. That is an incredible story. And it absolutely fills me with why the arts is so important, and why representation is so important, and why, your principal and the theater teacher who was able to see, let's try this approach, that is so incredible. I'm honestly taken aback by that story because I see that all the time here.
I'm sure you do.
But it never, I guess I hate the phrase, but it never gets old. You know what I mean? Because it's to see someone turn that life around or make an impact or figure out that there was a different path or a different way to go is incredible. And it's why the arts are so needed and why the arts in schools are so needed, and why, why we're still around all these years later. But I love that story. It's fantastic. The play you wrote, have you done it since then? Did you ever?
I'm trying to think. I did do it one time since then.
Did you? Okay.
And it was about 6 or 7 years later.
Okay.
And then I haven't done anything since then.
Right.
I wrote a screenplay and did some other stuff like that. But nothing like that. And it's kind of funny. My true love, even though I write a lot of opinion columns and I, wrote some movie scripts, my love is always theater.
Yeah.
And people always are surprised when I say that I want to return to theater. But for me, it's about getting to the point where I can do it. If I had all the leisure time in the world, or if I had a way to financially support myself in that way, I would return to theater so quick, because it's just, to me, this is this total sappy, part of me, the artsy person in me. But there's nothing purer than bearing your soul on stage in front of an audience. It's not the same as a movie. It's not the same as anything else I've ever experienced as an artist.
Absolutely. Let's get you on stage with us maybe then in La Habra. But too, one of the I love what you just said right now, because it's actually a big mantra with what we have called our Teens on Tour program, which is the one that goes into the schools and goes throughout the country. Teens on Tours, we take real teenagers to do these shows on the school campuses. This way, when one of our teens performs and then has a Q&A afterwards, it's that realism. It's that where's the line drawn from? Is this a play or is this real life kind of a thing? And we get kids who, like you were saying when you were younger, were on certain paths, who turn their life around, and we take them into the schools to talk to the students, and they get to hear from them about, when we used to have, we don't do it anymore because it ran its course, but we used to have a show about drugs and alcohol, and we'd get 17-year-olds who were sober 3 years, which means they were, leading this rough life from 11 to 14 sometimes. And so we get these young people who are just regular teenagers who also happen to have a love for performing. These aren't kids who are coming in who are being told what to say. Yeah, they have a script, but when it comes to that Q&A afterwards, when their real life stories come out, we hear people like young Brandon, who tell their stories and say, look, this is what my life was like beforehand, and this is how I'm able to deal with it or confront things now. And the inspiration that comes from that is just, they walk in saying, oh, I don't want to see a show. This is a play. I don't want to be a part of it. And even some teachers say to us, look, sure, I know you have this Q&A afterwards, but our kids aren't going to talk, just so you know. We just kind of we got this, and we play and we come out, and that Q&A goes on. It could go on for hours if we let it, because there's that realism, there's that connection, there's that dialogue of just young people talking to young people about, look, here's where my life is, and here's how we can all, sounds cheesy, but how we can make the world better together, and that's.
Yeah. Well, until you really do it, I'm not sure people understand the amount of release that you get when you're expressing yourself through something like theater, that medium.
Right. Well, there's that immediate connection. Mm-hmm. You feel that in the room. When you go see a movie or a TV show, or even nowadays through Zoom, like this last year has, forced us all to do, yeah, there's still, it's great to see faces, great to have, but there's still that warmth in the room that you just can't replace. And when you walk on stage and there's 1,000 people watching you, and you get that immediate laugh, that immediate tear, or that gasp, or whatever, it just fuels you as a performer and makes you want to do better. And even when we go to some schools where maybe the audience already doesn't want to be there because they just don't want to be there for whatever reason, because they're young people, that motivates our kids. It motivates our teens, because now it's like, okay, a bigger challenge, rather than kind of saying, oh, they don't want us here, we're going to walk away. Our kids kind of rise up to that and say, well, we're going to make sure our message comes across. We're going to make sure we reach those kids that don't want to be here, because we want to make sure the impact gets to every single student out there,
Right. Yeah. And I remember one of the first playwrights I was introduced to was Miguel Pinero. And it worked for me because Miguel had been in prison. He had, wrote Short Eyes out of prison, and he was kind of a rough guy, had a rough background, and he was easy to relate to. So it wasn't, theater, because from the outside perspective, some people view theater like golf, right? They view it as something that's inaccessible, something that's elitist, but it's not that way at all.
Right. Right. Well, and it certainly can be in a lot of ways. You look at Hamilton, which is a great show, but you go see that, tickets go up to $700 at that point.
Yeah. When you're talking Broadway, it's a different story.
Yeah. Although Lin-Manuel did some free shows. I mean, he's been fantastic in terms of trying to get young people, making it accessible, things like that. But that perception, I think, definitely stems from that the ticket prices are so high up there.
Well, okay. So let's talk about that. So I guess I didn't think about Broadway, and I guess I didn't think about it because I've never been to Broadway.
Sure.
So it's always been off Broadway. How can that be fixed? Where these shows on Broadway that you're right, they are expensive, and they are inaccessible for a lot of people. How do we fix that in theater so everybody can enjoy those shows?
It's a great question, and I don't have an answer for the Broadway perspective, because I know that so many Broadway shows don't start seeing a profit until 14, 16 months into their run, because in theater, you're putting all the money out up front.
Sure.
You're doing everything up front with the hope that you're going to sell tickets. And so, there are shows that have literally opened and closed the same night because ticket projections for the next few weeks or whatever were at 50%, and they just know we're not going to make money off that. Even this last year, everything closed down. Disney's Frozen announced they weren't going to reopen. They couldn't survive being closed for a year. So it's a tough industry in that sense. And we survived this because of the wonderful donors, supporters we have who kind of stood up and said, look, we know you will not we're not going to survive this last year of being closed if we didn't have support from so many people. And theaters just can't operate. Even the idea of, limited capacities. Okay, if theaters can open at 40%, no theater's going to do it because you just can't.
Right.
That being said, one thing for us, we've made it a priority to do. All of our shows have a pay what you can option. Somebody can show up and just put $1 down, and we're going to hand them a ticket. Because we want to make sure people come see the shows and have accessibility to our performances. We do discounts, we give away tickets because we want to address that. If Broadway can't, we want to be able to, and so we ensure that a price is never the reason why you can't come see a live show. But like I said, I will say Lynn has done a lot of things with Hamilton, lotteries. They did free shows for schools in LA, I think a couple years ago, where schools all got to go see the show for free. But I think he's in a unique position to use his stature and his success right now to be able to do that. But a show opening on Broadway where opening night, they're already $2 million in the red. I think it's hard to get your investors to say, let's give away some tickets, I would love to see a solution. I would love that. I would love for young people to be able to be a part of more theater, but it is difficult for a lot of them, and I think we all have to find a way to chip in some way, even if it is discounted or whatever. But I think that's part of what our success has been for the last 25 years. We target an audience that most theaters really kind of ignore. Teen audiences they don't have deep pockets. So theaters really aren't going after them. And that's the audiences of tomorrow. We need them, But if you go look at most theaters across the country, they have a children's theater program and they have their Broadway series. And that's kind of why I created this company when I was 7. Because I had nowhere to go. I didn't want to see Charlotte's Web, which we ironically do now as a company. But I didn't want to see Charlotte's Web when I was 17, and I couldn't afford the Broadway shows. So where did I go from that age range? Where did I get to see myself in the audience? Where did I get to see myself on stage? That didn't exist. So we created it. And I think a lot of people were hungry for that. And that's why we're here all these years later. Because if you're a young person like today, right now it's late at night, all day I had a dozen teenagers here working in our warehouse because they love this organization. They want to be a part of it because they, see that they can be a part of something and contribute to something like this. And so we give them that opportunity in every way that we can.
So how does it work in relationship to the local high schools? Do you bring in students all to one central location, or because you're not connected to a high school in your main
We have
location?
no official relationship with one in a formal capacity, but we have a great working relationship with a lot of them. So when we do our shows, let's say here in La Mirada, we basically announce our season. We do shows based on literature. So we'll do shows like next year we're doing The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Very popular book, and schools are working with that. So that kind of knocks on a few stones. It allows schools to expand their literature and language arts program. And so when they come in, it's already based on something they're working with in their classroom. It also covers the theater portion of it. And so we try to cover all those bases and try to be an extension of a school's curriculum, if you will. We did a show called The Giver. We were the first company in the West Coast to do that show because no other theater company was looking at that teen market. We did it. We sold out like 9 performances, sold like 20,000 tickets to all these schools because no one was going to do that show. Nobody realized how important that would be to a teacher and to a curriculum. And so we did it, and people loved it. And so we're constantly working with schools and teachers to find out what would you want to see on stage, what would help your curriculum, and let us do it. And so we do it, and our shows sell out so quick because of that aspect of it. So the educational spin to what we do is the foundation of everything that we do on stage.
So the kids are doing it after school.
Yeah. So, the field trips are in the daytime. So the schools bus them.
Okay.
And our performers, everything is age appropriate. So we did Wrinkle in Time last year, or 2 years ago now. The main characters are all between 10 and 14. So we had young kids playing those roles, and they would rehearse at night and then come and do our show. The adults all play the adults. Our Teens on Tour program are all real teens in those characters, because they're playing teenagers. So everything we do is cast based on the age of the character. Everyone volunteers their time because they realize by doing that, we're able to offer the deeply discounted tickets to all the schools. And so they pay very little when compared to other things on stages of that size.
Do you have a particular favorite play of your own that you like that they...
Yeah, it's one of our Teens on Tour program shows. It's called The Center of the Universe. We've been doing that title since the year 2000. That's the one that deals with racism, intolerance, and it's sad to say that the message is still so needed. But it's a powerful show. And when you have the real teens up there doing it, we go through history, talking about the Holocaust, slavery, more recent events, school shootings, September 11th. Like that, and we tie all those into a modern day storyline. And so we find all the tie-ins with the basic message that if we all just saw each other as equally human, that we all had our own loves and fears and families and hopes and desires, that if I saw you as a human being like I am, then I couldn't possibly have done these things that have happened historically. It's that ability for people to separate themselves from that humanity that allows so many of these horrific acts to happen. Mm-hmm. If we realize the pain we're causing, even just by, just the things we say to each other, or just, it doesn't always have to get to a violent act, but even the things we do on a daily basis where we stop and realize, I wasn't a part of humanity for those 10 minutes earlier today, or I wasn't really doing my best to contribute to society today, because it takes effort to be a good person. I feel like a lot of times, it's easy to just let things out of sight, out of mind, or doesn't affect me, so I'm not going to worry about it. And we have this theory with our kids. We always say, we walk by one piece of trash, it's easy to look away because it's just one piece of trash. Mm-hmm. When it becomes a mound of trash, suddenly everyone says, well, how come no one did anything about this sooner? But we don't do anything about it when it's just one little thing. And when it gets to a dozen pieces, we still, we're able to walk by it. But when it's a huge issue, that's when everyone seems to care. And that's not really a great way for us. We've got to all be getting involved and caring when it's a much smaller thing, so it never gets that large, pile, if you will.
Yeah, I don't think social media has helped at all times in that way. I think it's made it really easy for humans, and humans will be humans, to say things off the cuff without necessarily thinking about them or reacting when you're overly emotional. and those words sometimes get picked up and amplified.
Yeah.
And, I see it all the time on social media. The way that people treat each other on social media, is so different than how generally they would if they were in person.
Right.
So it's easier to do. It's like road rage when people are behind, the steering wheel with windows and car doors between them. They tend to act in a way that they wouldn't if it were otherwise.
Right.
And
it's interesting. We actually talk about with that show, The Center of the Universe, in our efforts to always find a correlation. Why is cyberbullying so easy? Because you're behind a screen. No one sees you. The KKK, easy to say the things behind the ropes, because they don't see your face, and it's a simple comparison, but we can find similarities to, how are you able to say such things and shout such hatred and do such things? Well, when your face isn't being seen, it's amazing how easy it is to let those things come out, and to hide behind those things. And that's so dangerous. It's a dangerous mindset to have where we're a different person when our face isn't visible, and that's I think it gets a lot of people into a dark place, I think, if you will, and I see a lot of our kids who deal with that cyberbullying aspect, and I'm so grateful that I didn't have that as a kid to grow up with, because I can't imagine one mistake or one thing being captured, or one embarrassing moment, I guess would even be worse, to be captured and have that thrown everywhere. I mean, young people are committing suicide at a higher rate than ever because of cyberbullying and social media. And it's just tragic, and that's something we try to address also in some of the theater we do.
Yeah, it is horrific. I think about it a lot too. I'll see these videos sometimes that pop up online where you have some kid getting bullied or something, and rather than step in, you get kids that whip out their phones and film it. And
exactly. Yeah. It's and you think, why aren't you using your phone to call for help? Why aren't you using, and there are times where that video footage has helped in the capture or whatever. And I get that, but yes, more often than not, it's people just saying, well, this is going to get a lot of views if I film this, that's their first thought, as opposed to, I have a helpful tool in my hand to help stop this before it escalates, and it's scary that that's the first mindset that so many people have today.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how you fix it, because it rewards that type of mentality in a lot of ways inadvertently. Well, I mean, you could argue that it was designed that way. Right. But I don't know how we fix it, because we have to fix it on a human level first if the technology isn't going to change.
Well, we dive into that again with that social media show, in that it's the kids right now who are kids who are the ones who are going to have to fix it. At least that's my mindset, because the parents of the teenagers in our program didn't grow up with that. So they don't have the best advice to give, because they don't know, they didn't have Instagram as a teenager. They didn't have, 20 cameras filming everything. And so a lot of my kids say, my teachers aren't stepping in, my parents aren't stepping in, because they don't have the answers. Our parents, or we dealt with regular bullying, if you will. Mm-hmm. We can deal with that. We can give advice. We would just say, well, turn the other cheek or whatever. But when stuff is filmed nowadays, that stuff is following you, and you can't escape that, and you can't delete it. Once one person has it, it's out there forever, and you're 30 years later, and that video is going to pop up still on you, and we didn't have that growing up. We didn't deal with that. So it's these kids today who are going to become adults and have their kids, who hopefully will be able to then say, hey, I dealt with what you're dealing with, and now I have advice of how I went, and dealt with this today.
Right. Well, the arts, again, is one of those things that helps heal all parts of the pain that you feel at times. And I think people who, feel broken or feel bullied or feel like they don't have a place in life always have a home in the arts. Absolutely. And again, that's that side of me that the arts is a giant Band-Aid in a lot of ways. And it's a rose in a lot of ways, because you can fix this wound and then grow it into something beautiful, even, heal it. Yeah. And it's nothing else can do that I know of.
I agree. I wholeheartedly agree. And I think that's what my heart gets filled every day I'm here. It's called work. It's my job here, but I'm not at work when I'm here. I love what I do, and to see these kids grow, just like you said, we've had kids who've been around for, 10, 15 years in our program. I call them kids now, but they're, almost 30, but they start off when they're kids, and I see them become adults and have kids of their own. And you see that, and to know that your organization has remained a part of their lives all those years, it proves exactly what you're saying, that, it blossoms and grows and becomes something very beautiful. Absolutely.
So, Steve, I know that, we talked probably more about theater than American Me, to the audience. It just went that way because I am a theater person, and I have a huge heart for people that are doing things like you're doing, just because of my background. So I appreciate, people like you and programs like this, and I think they're important for people that want to follow your work and also want to know more about how they can get one of those American Me posters autographed. What's the best way that they can do that?
Yeah, so I created an account recently all about American Me on Instagram, which I was very surprised how quickly people were engaging in that, which is great. But that handle is La Primera _lives. And on there is a link to get that poster of the final scene. And then my organization we've been talking about is called Phantom Projects. And if you just search Phantom Projects Theater Group, we'll pop up. We're on every social media that there is. We're on TikTok now. We're on anything that exists, we're on now. But Phantom Projects Theater Group is the name of the organization that I work with and created, and that we're using to help the community as much as we can.
That's great. So I highly encourage everybody to go follow him, go support what he's doing. I thank you for coming on to the show, Steve.
Thank you.
For all of our audience, I thank you for tuning in. I encourage you to give my YouTube channel a follow and to follow me on social media as well, at Brandon L. Maxwell. I'll be back next week. I hope you decide to join me again. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your week.